we tied strings to it to where he just didn't get a debt increase, debt ceiling increase without any strings attached. And that's the first time that's happened. That's never happened. And here's the thing, that was an easy vote. We had people saying, don't increase the debt ceiling. But what happened was Harry Reid was back there plotting and planning a whole different plan that allowed the president to have the debt ceiling increase with tax increases on the middle class and the job creators, the millionaires and billionaires, the subchapter S corporations, which made that a really easy vote. And if you think about it for a minute, with the debt ceiling, with the payroll taxes, what happens is these guys like to run it right to the edge of the cliff, right to the 11th hour every single time. We know there's time on things that we've got to get out there and get out in front of it. The payroll tax holiday, this will just prove a case in point. The president wanted 1 full year on the tax holiday. The Congress wanted 1 full year on the tax holiday, and the Senate wanted 1 full year on the tax holiday. So the Congress, basic, Civics 101, we do 1 full year, we send it over to the Senate. The Senate sends back to the Congress 60 days, I think is what it ended up being. And then you know what they did? Instead of being like grown-ups, they went on vacation. And it's really sad because what we should have done is since we couldn't agree on how we wanted to do it, then you have what they call a conference. And you sit down like big boys and girls, and you try to get things worked out. They were unwilling, to do that. The last FAA bill last year, Senate did it again. You want to talk about, I tell you, this Senate, mark my words, will go down in the history books as the most dysfunctional Senate in the history of the United States of America. You've got 1,070 days since a budget. You've got over 25 bipartisan jobs bills just sitting there, waiting for them to say, we're going to take this up and push it through. Now, I thank God the jobs bill that they just signed on, the president signed it back in last week. Awesome. Kudos. Thank you. But it's that kind of stuff there that is really hurting the country. And the dysfunction, continues to create uncertainty for the job creators who have lots of money sitting on the sidelines. And until they have that certainty, they're not going to pull that money out and start building and reinvest. And the infrastructure, transportation, these guys, we just did a 90-day extension. And now they want to do 18 months. Think about this for a minute. If you're the guy that's going to go out and buy this big grader or any type of equipment for building a bridge or a road, do you want 18 months or do you want 5+ years? You want certainty. We've got too many people out there that just don't understand what certainty does for the economy. The farm bill. The farmers want a 5-year. They're like, look it, just give us 5 years. Our country needs certainty, and we're just not getting it. So it's a pretty big problem, whether it's transportation. 18 months doesn't help with certainty. It really doesn't. So what we're hoping is we can go back out there and have these people sit down and both sides and come to some type of an agreement, find the common ground, find out what the differences are, and then try to come together and get something that's good for America, and forget about Democrat and Republican, and forget about the re-election. So many things are based on how do I get reelected, or how do we look good, or how do we make them look bad. It's that kind of stuff there that's really hurting the country, and it is quite frustrating. It actually causes this gray hair to come in.
If Obamacare is struck down in June, what's our next step with health care?
What you'll see happen right now, we're currently working on some plans. Just so you know, is that we had plans that Senator Mark Kirk had a really good plan put together, but was not allowed to come to the floor because Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let it. Here's something that people don't realize. For 4 years, the House floor, the People's House, was shut down by the Democratic leader. What happened is you couldn't come to the floor with an amendment or anything. I mean, it was completely, and that's what John Boehner said is, look, the House is going to work the people's will. If Democrats or Republicans want to come together with amendments across the board, we're going to allow it to happen. So the House is finally working, but what you'll see happen is, there's some good things that are in the bill. The pre-existing condition clause, some people really like the 26-year-old. But here's what you got to remember. You work at the hospital. is that a lot of these hospitals have made millions of dollars worth of investments into the infrastructure for computers.
Well, we tried to give, Genesis Health System gave over $60 million away of business last year. People couldn't pay. That was over 1/10 of our gross revenues. Now we're not for profit as far as the hospital, but you do need an operational margin to reinvest into the infrastructure, and it's pretty difficult to do when you have to give $60 million of business away.
Yeah.
And that's just from people that couldn't pay?
Correct.
Well, and one of there's a couple things I could see that could be really good fixes. I think number one is tort reform. Some of the experts say 25 to 35% of the problem, the cost is tort. Then you've got one of the things that we have as a family is we have an HSA, a health savings account. And when you see my family and I at the emergency room, I've got skin in the game, so it's an emergency. Allow companies to compete across state lines is another one. A lot of one of the bills that I'm working on now, and we're working with doctors to try to figure this out, but it's kind of like a charity care, to where currently doctors, when they have somebody come in and they don't have the funds to pay for the care, docs can't write that off. So what this charity care does is it lets the doctors write off whatever that charitable care that they gave away. Because here's the thing with doctors, and I'm sure you know some, is most of the doctors are willing to give away, care. Almost all of them that I know are willing to do that. Okay. But they should be able to write it off of their gain. So if you give $100 away, and you make $100, you should be able to write. So it's a pretty exciting bill, I think, that has. But there's lots of little pieces. We've got to make sure we take care of those that are the most vulnerable amongst us. When you look at some of the community health centers that are out there, those are pretty good, because what it does is it takes the load off of the emergency rooms. So you get people that are actually calling the doctor saying, hey, look at, I think I've got the flu or whatever. And rather than going to the emergency room, they're going to community health centers. So, a lot of little pieces of the pie. But that's what before we left a week and a half ago, I said, look, if this thing goes down in flames, which I believe it will, I don't believe that you can force any American to buy anything, through the federal government. But the heart of the Affordable Health Care Act is that mandate. So if that mandate's gone, because that's what fills the pool up with money, which allows them to do what they're doing.
Bobby, is part of that bill standardized processing, standardized claim processing? Because there's 20,000 different insurance companies out there. They all have 20,000 different ways of processing a claim, and they got people that they're paying just to decipher what the insurance company will pay, won't pay.
Well, and the coding is
and it is a nightmare. So if they had one standardized process to run their paperwork through that everybody must use, the same form,
and that's what the hospitals are putting together, as to where they have that. And that's where a lot of the hospitals have already invested into that infrastructure.
But there needs to be a referee to say, this is what we're going to use. This is what everybody's going to use.
That would be great, but it varies from state to state. The cost of us doing business at Illini is much greater than
that should be part
the state of Iowa.
That should be part of the standardized health care plan, is to get standardized processing. Yep. That is in itself a huge expense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For everybody.
If you look like Medicare, whatever part you're looking at, they're all the same, except for the premiums are different. So the customer knows exactly what they're getting. The only thing they're going to have difference is service and price. So they got to make sure they're going with the reputable company. But something like that would be really ideal to have.
You almost got to be a lawyer to decipher it.
Oh yeah.
I'm an amputee, and I've had lots of hospital bills, and you ask my wife. It is a nightmare.
Yeah. There's a couple of things also that in the Affordable Health Care Act that really have not a whole lot to do with health care. One is the medical device tax on American companies will shift more companies overseas. There's really no reason to have that in there. Another one that's really scary for the seniors is the IPAB. It's an Independent Payment Advisory Board, and these are the people that are going to ration health care. They're going to decide whether or not my 90-year-old grandmother gets the health care that she needs or not. And I think it's wrong to put a bureaucrat, somebody that is appointed